Well, hey there. Welcome to Standard Operating Procedure, the Intellify live broadcast. I'm Russell Lundberg, your host. Every Sunday here at 5 p.m. UTC, I go live to share tips, tricks, techniques, and tactics to help you love a career in telecoms. This week is part 3 of our series where we're developing a project tracker. The project tracker is when the company doesn't give you a project manager, but still there's a bunch of steps or tasks that need to be kept track of and status reported on. So the project tracker is a really simple, low impact way to do that, giving you maximum amount of value on the other end with the minimal amount of input to develop it. So in the first two episodes of SOP where we've been working on the tracker, let me show you what we've gotten so far. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, there we go. And we're going to share Excel. There we go. So here's the baseline. This is where we're headed. We can do without that. This is basically the tracker dashboard, and the title there says that it's a RAN project dashboard, because that's one of the most common needs for a tracker is for all of your sites, all the sites in your cluster, or even if it's every site in the network. If you need to run through a short checklist of tasks, such as you want to add a second carrier, or maybe it's a vendor firmware upgrade, maybe you need to cell split, anytime you need to repeat the same sequence of tasks in a whole bunch of different sites, the project tracker can help you out. So what this shows is week by week. You can see here's week by week here. There's the most recent week, and there's the oldest week. We track looks like the last 10 weeks here. And you also get these nice charts. All for free. Simply update your data, refresh your pivot tables, and the tracker, the dashboard is ready to go. So let's go back to our tracker, and let me run back 1 second here. We're going to look at, here's the dashboard we've got so far, and where we finished last week is we always start the same, right? Here's your raw data in the light yellowed cells. Really, there's only 3 pieces of information for every update, and that is the site identifier, the name of the task, and the date. When was this task completed? The rest of this are what I call synthetic fields, adding a little more information based upon the raw data that was typed or pasted in. That's where you start. The next thing you do here is you create the weeks that in the past, since this is ideally a week at a time tracker. Remember, there's your dashboard showing week at a time. Since we're showing a week at a time, we always create past weeks, and that's here. We populate them in advance so that they'll show up in the tracker automatically. You can see them there, right? Okay. So we've done that part. If we come back here to our dashboard, there's our week at a time. This column is just to show you it's 10 weeks. On the formal dashboard, I would probably delete that because it would be 10 weeks every time you presented it. So you wouldn't need to show that every single time. And then this is a simple count of how many tasks were completed. I admit, not very useful. Here's the project completion, which shows how much of the project was completed this week, right? And then this is the cumulative running total. But honestly, this is not very useful because it only shows the last 10 weeks. So if I just did this much, I'm going to get less. I'm going to get less because, sorry, this only shows, if you look at the formula, it's the sum of column G. Well, next week, the oldest week, that contribution will drop off. Now, I might get a new contribution from the current week, but this isn't showing me the whole project. I need to do something a little different. So we're going to go over to, that's tasks complete, task wait. I'm going to scroll around here a little bit. I see a couple of people have showed up. Hey, welcome to the Standard Operating Procedure broadcast. So we're showing this by week, and this shows how much of the project has been completed by week. I have to refresh my memory here. Yeah, this is by site and by week. Here we go. Yeah, here's the most recent week. So each time a task is completed, it gets added here in the yellow. I can fill that down just for the sake of argument. I can do the same thing here, but it'll be blank. Well, I didn't do that. Normally, I would wrap my formulas in something like a test. Just so is blank. Sure, that's the wrong way around. Just so if there's blank data, it doesn't cause those errors, right? I would need to do the same thing here. There's several ways to do that. I think that allowing those errors to show when they're easily anticipated, I think that's unprofessional. So I will wrap my formulas in an if error or if NA or something like that to hide the error if I know what it is. Okay, so the new data gets pasted here. My synthetic fields, here I create the week number based on the day, the date of the update. Here's the weight of that particular task, which is the weight for one task in one site. But overall project completion would be the weight of one task for one site divided by the number of sites. Here you see I have the range site count. And that just comes from my site lookup. I count how many tasks there are. Excuse me, how many site IDs there are. I've got 24. Here's that is right there. There's my site count named range, and I'm using that to calculate anytime I complete a task in one site, how much of the overall project does that represent? And you can see, completing the antennas task for one site is 1/2 of 1%. So back to our dashboard. What I'm getting here is I completed 4 tasks in this week, and that was a total of 1.8% of the overall project. What I need here is I want to be summing all of the tasks, their contribution to the overall project from the beginning of time. And here I'm only looking at the trailing 10 weeks, 8 to 17. So there's 8, here's 17. So that's what this is looking at. G8. That's weird. That's going to cause me a problem later. Anyway, so what I really want to do is total the project from the beginning. So I can come back. Here's my task weight for each site. Here you can see, so there's a couple ways I can do this. I can, in my dashboard, let's just do this. So, sorry. Really what I want to do, it's hard to do that. Okay, it's hard to do that straight from here because I don't know. I could just get that, but how do I subtract off 1 week of the project? So what we'll do is, here's the week num. I normally like to put a bunch of columns between a pivot table and my any other data, just in case the pivot table grows. I don't want to overwrite my data. That shouldn't happen because you don't add cell sites very often. This is set up by week num, so it'll grow rows, but it will not grow columns. So this is going to be my week num, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my week num from here. And remember, I always like to fill my formulas as a purplish color. So there's my week num, and now let's say we're going to start here. I'm going to sum this column of, that's not what I want. Sorry, I want first the contribution. Do one column over. So here's the contribution, which is just my get pivot data function. I can click anywhere. There you see that. And I want the week num as an argument. So right there, you can see it's hard coded. I'm going to replace that with a reference here. And it's a percentage. Click the wrong one. It's 1%. And I'm going to replace the week num again with a reference. There's my reference right there. I'm not doing a good job of grabbing that. I want to grab the fill handle right there in the corner. Why is that causing me a problem? That little knuckle in the lower right-hand corner, there we go. So like I said, I like to hide the errors. So let's wrap that in the if error function. So it'll display the value unless it's an error, in which case I'm going to display nothing. There we go. And now here I can sum it up. I'm going to start with the oldest or the farthest back in time. And now you can, I'm going to fill it right so you and remove the equal sign so you can see the formula. So I've anchored, so the sum argument takes a range or a comma separated list of ranges. And I've anchored, I'm just going to use a range, and I've anchored the first cell. So when I drag it, it's going to keep extending the range. The first cell is anchored, but the second part, to the right of the colon, that's going to keep changing. And you can see here, I'll just do this. You can see how as I drag the cell, it went from AH42 to AH41. That's just Excel. I anchored the first argument and Excel just adjusted it. But up here, it's going to be still anchored, but it's all the way down to row 42. AG3 down to AH42, right? Okay, so that's how I get that cumulative sum. So here is so here we're getting how much was completed each week. If you'd like, I can add there. I added a decimal point so you can see that it's partial completion. And this is the cumulative percentage. Now, what I always want to do, I can do this two ways. The generic way is using the index match combination. We've talked about index match before. Match will find a number in a range and return what row or what column in the range it was found. Excuse me. And then index will use that row or column number to look up in an array, a different range, to find another value that corresponds to what we first matched. So, for example, I might want to find the week number in this column, return the row number, and then return the cumulative percentage. But in this case, it's always the same. I'm always looking at the same 10 cells. This week is just like here in the dashboard, right? That cell E8, will always show the current week num in the project, the most recent week num. So I can put that here. I've mapped that effectively to was that 3, AH3. Let's just click and point on it. AH3. I guess I just could have filled that. There. So you can see for each week, it just increments the total completion percentage. This is weekly completion. To make it less confusing, how about weekly completed? And this is project completion. Is that more clear? So now, that's still 10 weeks, so make it a little bit easier to read by giving it a light bit of shading. Can you see that on screen? So you can see by week as the project completes. Oh, spell that correct. Any questions about that? Any questions about that? Let's go the other way here. Let's swing that a little wider. And we'll shrink this down a little bit so I can see any questions you've got. So now, as I add data, let's just add some data. So my last was January 28th, which was week 5. Oh, sorry. I have added data, but I haven't refreshed my pivot tables. So you can see on the dashboard, we're at week 3 of 2019. If I refresh the pivot tables, that should change. Hope that changes. Yeah, see, it's right there. Why isn't that changing? Config M3. Oh, because I have a date used. Sorry, no, I don't. No, I don't. Can't be week 3. That should be week 5. Why is that? K3. Why is that not showing date used? Well, I've got an error there. That's better. I had an error in my formula. So the latest week is 2019, 5th week, and now my dashboard will have adjusted. There you go. And we're at 50% completion. Because this changes automatically as we add data, even if there's, how to say that, even if we didn't accomplish any tasks during the next week, week 6, the way I'm calculating this will still increase. This will still increase, will still increment. And now that we have the completion percentage, it's just easy to chart, right? Let's insert a chart. I like the area chart for this. What we're going to call it is project completion. The Y values are going to be here, and the X values are going to be here. I never like by default, Excel always gives us a font size of 9. Maybe my eyes are getting old. Can you imagine? I always make it a little bigger. I like it blue. And my format, I need the format pane. The latest date is on the left. I always like to put the latest date on the right, but that's just me. Right here, values in reverse order. Well, that's not what I wanted. Labels. It should just be swapping. Yeah, there we go. I selected categories in reverse order. There we go. So now it shows the way I wanted. It shows the project growing as I would expect. Okay. Probably as good a place as any to show this. I always like a decent title, right? And I don't like to hard code it, because often what will happen is someone will say, hey, can you send me the chart of the latest status, the completion percentage, right? Well, really that needs to include the date. I think that should always include the date. So I like to, so let's say chart title. And so this is and make it a string so that I can embed a formula inside the title, and it'll change. So at this point, it's up to you. Let's say you just wanted to embed the date. So it would be text. You have to format. When you embed a date, You need to format it. Otherwise, it'll just show up as the number, the internal way Excel tracks dates, which is the count of days since January 1, 1900. You have to format that to display the way you want it. So this is going to be date used. That's my named range. And then my format let me wrap out that. So now you can see it has the latest date. Okay, and so now I would click on that, enter an equal sign, and click here. And again, I like the blue color. So now if somebody says, hey, can you send me the most recent chart, the date is embedded right inside of it. And this date is a formula, so it will change as the project dates change. So it's all automated right now. Let's show that. Updates. Let's just, I don't know. I don't want to, I'm going to cause a problem if I enter the same thing. So let's see. I don't have anything else for antennas. So let's do install powered. Let's say it was have it right, yeah. Let's do also 7. What's after powered? Backhaul. Let's put that out a few days. So 2 / there we go. And now let's refresh our pivot table. Before I do that, remember here's see, it doesn't reflect the project completion, but it does reflect the date, because the date doesn't depend on a pivot table. It just uses the max function. Let me show you that. So there's the date of the latest update. I just typed in 5 February 2019 because that's the max function, right? So I don't have to refresh a pivot table for my date or my week numbers to increment. But if you look at the dashboard, I haven't contributed to the project. Let me refresh the pivot table now. Pivot, analyze, refresh all. And now my dashboard will reflect that I completed something and it increased. The title of my chart incremented. The percentage completion incremented. All good, all automated. All I did was update the data and refresh the pivot table. And you've heard me say that many, many times, is I like to minimize the amount of work to update your workbooks, your dashboards. 2 steps. The first step is update your data, or I usually say, to avoid confusion, I say, bring in the latest data. And remember, there's 4 ways you can do that. You can type it, you can copy and paste it, you can import it from like a CSV, or you might have some kind of link, like an SQL link to a database or something. There may be others, but those are the 4 I know about, and I usually use one of those 3. Type it manually, copy and paste it from another source, or import a CSV or something like that. Anyway, that's the first step. The second step is refresh your pivots, and everything updates automatically. Let's see, make zoom at formula. Let's see. Which formula did you want to zoom on, Mario? This part up here, you can't really zoom on that. But what I can do is just copy it and paste it. That doesn't work because this is just the get pivot data function. wrapped inside an if error. So there's the formula. That's over here for like tasks completed. And really it's a get pivot data function, which remember, that's the way to pull data out of a pivot table. So how that works is right here, I enter an equal sign and then click, and that gives me the get pivot data function. And then what I always do, so that you can see it, I'll delete that equal sign. What I always do is I replace the hard-coded year week with a link like this. So here it would just be A2, or remember, here is where they're calculated automatically, and these year week, those values will increment as new data is added, or as time passes. As time passes. Is that true? Time passes? I think I haven't done that. Yeah. It always keys on the latest date in the data. So if I now added a date of the end of February, it would calculate automatically the weeks in between 5 February and the end of February, even though there is no data there. But if 5 February is the most recent update in the data, it won't change until the next more recent update. Okay? Yeah, sure. After the episode today, I'll email out the workbook so you can have a look at it. So where are we at now? Let's go kind of retrace our steps here a little bit. I always start with set up the updates. That's the yellow columns here. And I highlight them yellow so it's perfectly clear. This is what changes every time you need to bring in new data, your updates. Then I can create synthetic fields based upon my updated raw data. I set up a worksheet called config where I start to create basically variables. If you've ever programmed, variable values, I can configure, I can set the value of a variable here on the config worksheet. Hang on. And I use, let's freeze this, shall we? Yeah. I calculate, that's the minimum. Here's the maximum. And I calculate all these dates based upon the maximum value of the data in my updates table. And all that's doing is picking the maximum value in this column right here, 5 February. It's just the max function. And date used will be that maximum value unless I overwrite it. I can overwrite that. Let's say, let's try the first of the year. So now I've overridden the date used, and there's the start date, 1 January. And if now I look at the dashboard, it shows 1 January. If I remove that, it'll go back to the maximum value in the updates. There we go. All good. Completely automated. So this is kind of, I've not needed to use this often, the override, but it's happened a couple times where somebody said, wait a minute, some weeks ago, I thought you showed more than that or whatever. It's kind of nifty, and it's very easy to be able to just put in the date they say, and this is how the dashboard looked on that date. So every date in the worksheet keys off of this date right here, the date used. And if I do not override that date, the date used is the same as the most recent date in the raw data. If I do override, if I enter a value there, that's what the dashboard is going to use. Here we go, 1 January 19. Delete it, and it goes back. So that's kind of handy. I haven't used that very often, haven't needed that very often. When I did, it was nice to have it, but it's so easy to do. I don't find it any kind of tax. All you do is here, find the maximum value in the data, give the user a cell to which they can override, and then it's just this if statement. If there is an override value in B7, use it. If not, use B6. And this is the function that keys everything else. All the other formulas that need a date key off that date. So I only have to do it one place right here. So if I just change the value once, everything changes. Pretty cool, huh? I like that. Like I said, don't need it very often, but sometimes. All right, so we've got that. Oh, so let's go back now. We've got time. Let's go back to our dashboard. Now, what you often need to do is maybe, like in this example, you want to show progress. Here's the overall progress in this chart, but maybe you have regions, or maybe you have responsible technicians. So let's say, let's do like that. Here's the site lookup. So I started on that. Yeah, Abel was here last week. And Mario, let's get you in on this. So let's see, Mario. Oops. So this is a really nice thing about the approach that I take here is I've added this data. Sorry, I said Mario. Would you prefer Mario Botello? I know sometimes the Spanish countries, they use the two first names. So I've added this. I need to check one thing. This lookup, is it a named, it's a named range. I just need to make sure I just added more data to it. I need to make sure that it's automatically grows. So formula, define name, it's going to be site lookup. You can just tell I can click. Yeah, so it got it. That's the dynamic named ranges. I added a column of data and it grows automatically, yeah, like that. Yep. So now I can come back. Here's my raw data. Let's insert a synthetic field called responsible. I'm going to look up the site ID, and then it's function F3 is the shortcut. I want site lookup. And then the fourth column was the responsible, and then I always use false. That's an exact match. True is an approximate match. I don't know what that means. So right there we have the name Abel, yeah, Abel. And remember, I don't like errors. If I just double click here, I'm going to get errors where there's no data, right? So let's wrap that in a function. And what was it? It was if NA. Yeah, it's the NA function. So I could use the if NA here. If it's a NA, display nothing. That's all that means. Double click. And now those NAs are hidden. So I can come back to my dashboard. So if I want to do completion by the responsible person, what I need to do first is I don't have that value. Here's my task complete. Well, I don't have that. So let's add a worksheet. Pivot. So it's just a pivot. And remember, all my pivots are using, I only have one data table, right? So insert a pivot, and that's called updates. I think it's called updates. It must be. And I always key on year, week. And I'm going to, I need to refresh it because I added that responsible, yeah? So there's responsible. I'll put that here. And now let's do project completion. And I'm not sure if that's right. Let's take a look at it. Just to make it easier to look at, we can do our number, percentage. We'll leave one decimal in there. A little bit easier to look at. And now back on our dashboard, we can do, that's actually not correct. We might do, and then who else was in, did I have a Mary? Config site lookup. I've got Russell and Mary. Okay. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so now let's do that get pivot data function to get the completion percentage by responsible person. Responsible. And see, now we're going to have the same issue we had here. What I've got here is only going to show I'm going to link and here's the week. I'm going to link and then I'm anchoring it. So this one's now anchored. I know you can't see that. Let me so here you can see the $ here is ahead of the E. So I'm anchored on the column, right? Here the $ is ahead of the 7, which means I'm anchored on the row 7. Okay. That way, that allows me to do this. And I can also do that. There's those errors. So same thing, I can wrap it with an if error function, hide the errors. In this case, the get pivot data gives that error when there's no data for that, well, that combination of weak and responsible. So I'm just going to hide it like that. And again, I can drag and I can drag. There you go. But again, that's only showing the completion of each week. It's not showing the cumulative, you know, the built up over time. If I look at all of it, it should still be at 54%. It's not. Yeah. So there's the problem. The problem is here, I've tracked the overall completion by the number of sites. And that doesn't work because Abel here has a bunch of sites. Mary has a few. So what we need to do is calculate the completion percentage for each of these people individually so that we can see how Abel's completion percentage is going, how Mario's is going, how Mary's and how Russell's is progressing, right? You understand that? Does that make sense? But again, it's just another synthetic field. It's a little more complicated though, because now I need to know this is the task weight. See, I need to sum it up for each individual. Let's just make sure I'm doing this right, because I've already done this before here for the regions, right? It's the same exact approach. So here's my updates. And for the region, yeah, so I need to know how many sites are associated with each of the responsible people. And it looks like I did that with a pivot table, sites by region. So let's come back here. It helps a lot to have done it before. So let's do yet another worksheet. Pivot. Sites by responsible. And again, this is a little different because I don't want updates. I want the sites lookup table. How many sites does Abel have? How many does Mario have? Well, that's this table. How did I do that? I need sites by region, pivot sites by region. Right there. And the data I used was site lookup. Sure, of course. Sites by, so here I had sites by responsible, but insert a pivot table, and that was site lookup. And I did it differently, didn't I? You see, the pivot table always assumes the first row of a region is a column header. And that's not true here. It was true when I did it by region. So let's go back and fix. I had just forgotten this. Let's go back and fix. Here's my formula. Site lookup. See, it doesn't include the top row. Well, I'm going to make it. Oh, it's B1. I changed the wrong thing. B. Oh yeah, I have the offset here, which I don't want. But that may not be done. Yeah, see, it's not getting the last row. So I need to add one. Can you see that okay? I'm sure you cannot. Offset config site lookup B1. There's the upper left-hand corner. Oh. It's the count. So I should use the count A function here. You can't see that very well, but so I used count. Count will return the quantity of cells in the range that have a numeric value. So that works on site ID because it's numeric. That column, it works, but it won't count the header row. So I either have to use count A, which returns the number of cells that are not blank, or I could just add one to the result of count. I'm just going to use count A. And now that should be everything. Sure, it's highlighted everything. So if I come back to my pivot table, sites by responsible, refresh, now it changed. So I want by responsible. How do I do that over here? Okay. Right. So, gosh, I don't even need the sites. That's all I really need. It'll make for simpler formulas. So now I have the number of sites for each. Right. So in my update here, this will be the completion percentage for the task. Oops, sorry. Task lookup. Oops, must be 3. Let's have another look at that. Task lookup, config tasks. Yes, it's 3. No, that's order. The weight is 4, sorry. Column 4 here. And then I have to divide that by how many sites each the responsible person has. Divided by, here's the responsible name. No, sorry. Hang on. equals here. Let me click this and then we'll walk through this again. Okay, so there's the formula. Where did I click? Neither one of those. So let's. Oh, it's way down here. Well, that's why it's goofed up. Okay, now let's do it again. Sorry for the confusion there. So there's the formula. Just like with the project completion, we need to know how much this individual task, what's the completion for this task divided by the overall number of sites. That's how we calculated the project completion. For the responsible completion, it's going to be this task, that's the VLOOKUP, divided by how many sites are assigned to each responsible. Okay, so that's the get pivot. So, but what I have to do now is I have to link it because every row might have a different responsible. So here it's correct, it's able, but I'm going to link it to here. So now this one's Russell. It should be different. Yeah, it's different because I have a different number of sites. Now that's going to error. See, it errors. So let's do that again. Remember, that worked out pretty good. That was the if NA. This is just to hide the errors that I know about. There we go. All the errors wiped out. So now I know how much, when one of my sites completes a task, I know how much that contributes to the completion of my sites. So sites by responsible, that was that one, and then responsible complete. Okay, now back at our dashboard. Is that right? 2. It's still not right. Did that? Oh yeah, same thing. And I'm missing a row. So what that tells me there is prior to this week, 28% of the project had already been completed, right? That's what that's telling me. So what I need is, just like we did a cumulative function on the project completion, we need a cumulative function on the individual responsible. It was here. Is it making sense? So that was pretty easy to do. We did the week num. So let's do week num. Same as before. This is back to config. I say week num, it's actually year week, isn't it? And then that's the And then now it needs, there's 4 people. You'll see why I did that in just a minute. So this is linked to here, row, and the weak num is linked to column O. You can see all those errors again. So that's the if error function. If ERROR. We're going to wrap it in an if error function and then drag it. There we go. So that hides all my errors. And then now this will be this block here. That shows, sorry, this block over here, this shows how much was completed in each responsible area each week. But what we need is the cumulative total. So we did that before. P43. Yeah, and there should be 52.4, which is, why is there a slight difference? I'll need to figure that out. If we come back now to the dashboard, so here's where we'd use, I think, would be, we could do it the same way, but it's supposed to be a learning experience here. So it would be the index match. We should use index match. So how about we're at our 1 hour, and I don't want to take too much of your time. Let's start there. We're going to, I can't type and talk at the same time. Pivot sites by responsible, no, completion by responsible, pivot, responsible, complete. So next week we'll pick up there. We're going to change this. Right now, it's just pretty much hard coded. And I think what we need to change it so it's looking at this table here. And what we did on the dashboard for the completion percentage is this. Think of it as a window, and it's like you're on a train and you're looking out the window of the train. The project data is going by, right? And we're looking at the window, looking at the last 10 weeks of that project data. So it'll always be the last 10 weeks. And we could do it just like this, just like we did it for, I forget where is it. Was it here? No. Here. These 10 cells will always show the last 10 weeks. So these dates move by, but these 10 cells always show the last 10 weeks of cumulative completion. And that same would also be true here. Sorry, right here. These 10 will always be the last 10 sum of completion for Abel, for Mario, for Mary, and for Russell. So we could take the exact same approach, but let's use the index match function. It'll give us a little practice with the index match function. I got to think that through a little bit. Okay. After we're done here, I'll upload this to the YouTube channel. I'll put a link to the YouTube channel so you can go back and watch the recording if you'd like. All my past episodes of Standard Operating Procedure are up on the YouTube. Most of them, not all of them. I think I've lost a couple, but they're all most of them are up on the YouTube channel. I'll upload this video to the YouTube channel as well, and I'll send out an email with a link to the YouTube channel and with a link to download the workbook we're creating so far. Next week we're going to pick up with that responsible complete, and we'll practice using the index match function because that comes in handy in many cases. Sometimes, yeah, we'll talk about that next week, but sometimes index match is the right way to go. Okay, thanks a lot for joining me. Appreciate seeing you here each week. See you next week. And remember, always be an action taker. Thanks a lot now. Bye-bye.